The first red flag wasn't the meeting invite titled Streamlined Transition Mandatory Attendance. It was the fact they booked it at 6:47 a.m. Not 6:45, not 7, 6:40 freaking 7. The kind of time chosen by someone who owns a Peloton, a ring light, and zero conscience. Lena Morgan walked into conference room C with the calm of a woman who's triple-checked her disaster recovery backups. Her hair still damp from the shower. Blazer thrown over a Rolling Stones t-shirt, coffee in one hand, silence in the other. On the far side of the table, Max Brighton, CTO and walking LinkedIn post, sat flanked by two HR reps who looked like they were about to serve gluten-free funeral cake. Lena, Max said, smiling with all the warmth of a Tesla with a dead battery, you've been an incredible part of our journey. But as we modernize our infrastructure, some legacy roles, well, they evolve. Some legacy people, too, HR Karen added, reading straight from her laminated empathy script. This is a redundancy-based departure, not a performance matter. Max chuckled. Software replaced you. 4 words, that's all it took. Not thank you, not we'd like to retain your expertise. Just a smug declaration like a kid revealing he just automated his mom's cooking with ChatGPT and a microwave. Lena stared for a moment, said nothing, just tightened her grip around the paper coffee cup until the lid cracked slightly. Quick thing before we go any deeper, if you're one of the 97% listening to these stories without subscribing, just know, this is the kind of betrayal that fuels our caffeine addiction and content production. Hit that subscribe. It keeps this chaotic little team from coding emotional damage into our scripts. Back to Lena. HR handed her the exit packet like it was a Starbucks gift card and not the professional obituary of someone who'd literally written the code running half their damn company. She flipped to the first page, then the second. On page 4, she saw it, the termination date. 2 days before her contract's auto-renewal clause kicked in. 2 days, they were trying to outgame her. Any questions? HR Karen chirped, scribbling something that looked an awful lot like smiled during termination. Problematic. Lena looked up, her eyes scanning Max like she was mapping weak spots on a busted firewall. I wrote the license, she said evenly. Max smiled wider, clearly not listening. Or worse, listening and underestimating. Of course. And we appreciate your contributions. That's why we're flying in the new team next week. You'll have a chance to do a handoff before your final day. Shouldn't take more than a few hours. She nodded slowly, each vertebrae in her neck screaming with the effort it took not to lunge across the table and uninstall his oxygen privileges. The meeting ended like a bad breakup, awkward silences, fake sympathy, a forced handshake. Lena left the room with a folder in one hand and a hurricane in her spine. She didn't cry. She didn't slam doors. She didn't say, "You'll regret this." She just walked back to her desk, logged in one last time, and marked the date and time in a private encrypted note. License trigger 9C activation countdown, T-minus 46 hours. By the time the office lights blinked to sleep that night, Lena had already backed up everything that mattered, her commit logs, her notes, her contingencies. Clause 9C had been buried in the Orion Ops source code licensing since version 2.3.9, a clause no one had ever questioned. Hell, no one even read it. Why would they? It looked like boilerplate. Termination of employment shall void the deployment license. Auto-renewal not applicable upon involuntary separation. Activation key expires immediately upon role revocation. No grace period, no recovery. Corporate legal had rubber-stamped it 6 years ago. Because again, no one listens to the woman who built the thing they're standing on. But they would. Oh, they would. The exit interview smelled like peppermint toner and passive aggression. HR had cranked the AC to morgue-level chill, probably to keep emotions professional. Lena sat across from a junior compliance officer who looked like she'd practiced empathy in front of a ring light, flipping through forms with the dead-eyed energy of someone choosing a Netflix show she'd already seen. Let's go over the separation checklist, she chirped, like this was a scavenger hunt and not the slow public execution of 10 years of Lena's work. Laptop, turned in. Access card, surrendered. Work phone, still in the padded envelope. Soul, already repossessed by the smug gods of silicon arrogance. Lena signed where she was told, her pen slicing ink across lines like surgical incisions. Each box checked was a funeral bell for the life she'd poured into Corvalux. Each thank you for your contributions stickered onto the moment like a smiley face on a coffin. Just a quick reminder, the compliance officer said, tapping the top of a glossy page with Comic Sans-level seriousness, your NDA remains in effect for 3 years post-termination. This includes proprietary architecture details, client schemas, and any private logs or admin credentials you may have been exposed to. Lena blinked once. It was less of a warning and more of a bedtime story they told themselves so they could sleep at night. None of them realized she was the architecture, the logs, the schema, the system they were protecting her from. She named its goddamn functions like they were her children. We're all very excited about the transition. The HR lead piped in from the corner, sipping on an energy drink that tasted like printer fluid. Our new partners in Hyderabad are set to take over Orion Ops maintenance starting next week. They'll bring a fresh perspective. Lena smiled, just slightly. They'll need it. Oh, said the compliance officer, missing the barb entirely. They're very talented. They've already proposed containerizing the deployment layers to simplify the rollout on AWS. Lena tilted her head. Interesting strategy. I hope they like Colonel Panics. Nobody laughed. She watched the clock tick over 2:16 p.m., precisely the moment her employment status flipped from active to separated in the Corvalux system. That timestamp would be recorded on 6 servers, 4 HR databases, and her own private log stored in a cold storage Git repo under the name GoodluckMaxJSON. Lena leaned back slightly and reached into her bag, pulled out the severance agreement she'd been handed in the streamlined transition meeting. She flipped to the amended clauses, buried deep in paragraph 14.3, about forfeiting rights to derivative works and assigning all post-employment architecture royalties to Corvalux's holding company. Nice try. I'm declining the severance, she said calmly, sliding the document back across the table. The compliance officer blinked. I'm sorry, unacceptable clause amendments, she said. I won't be signing. But you'll lose the payout, HR Karen said, eyebrows touching her hairline. It's generous. I'll live. The shrug she got from legal was so casual it could have been mistaken for a yoga stretch. That's your prerogative. Lena stood. There was no grand speech, no slow clap, just the faint rustle of her blouse and the cold click of the door as she walked out. Back in her apartment, she sat down in front of her personal rig, a beast of a machine she'd built piece by piece, humming like a coiled dragon. She navigated to the secure license management interface she'd created years ago, something no one at Corvalux even knew existed. She entered the timestamp of her termination, uploaded the official separation notice, entered her internal auth key, still valid for another 17 minutes. Then she scrolled to the field labeled Orion Ops License Auto-Renew Override. She typed in a single word, nullify, and hit save. Registry updated. License status, expired pending verification. Activation rollback, scheduled T+9H post-separation. She pushed her chair back, walked to the kitchen, and poured a whiskey over 3 cubes. Somewhere in the office, Max Brighton was probably ordering a celebratory protein smoothie. Maybe he was talking about how disruption is hard but necessary. Lena took a sip. Let's see how he likes her version of disruption. By 9:00 a.m., she was back at Corvalux, armed with nothing but a lanyard and the world's most patient expression. They'd asked her, to train the new dev team before she left. Knowledge transfer, they called it. Like you could download 10 years of blood, sweat, and caffeine into a 30-minute slideshow between catered lunch and passive snickering. She sat at the head of the conference table, a cheap projector humming like a dying bee beside her. All 5 engineers in matching hoodies stared at their screens like kindergartners mid-Zoom meltdown. The one closest to her, some cocky little MIT cosplay named Travis, was wearing noise-canceling headphones during the presentation. Slide 6, she said, clicking the remote. This is the traffic arbitration layer. It's not well documented, so listen carefully. If you deploy this without adjusting the mutex weights in the node scheduler, it'll deadlock under load. Travis raised a hand without looking up. We're probably just going to rebuild this whole thing on AWS anyway. Microservices, containers, the works. Lena smiled, slow and dangerous. Good luck replicating multi-node failover from scratch, especially when one of the nodes is actually an illusion to keep legacy SFTP integrations from crashing. Another dev blinked. Wait, what? Lena clicked to slide 7. It's called protective spoofing. I invented it during the 2017 logistics outage while you were probably still Googling what's a semaphore. Silence. Awkward keyboard tapping. One guy in the corner wrote down spoofing, with a question mark like it was a new Harry Potter spell. They weren't listening, not really. They thought they could reverse engineer genius with Stack Overflow and prayer. They didn't see the trap they were crawling into, because no one told them the ground was rigged with context. By noon, the knowledge transfer session had devolved into vibe-based learning. Travis was watching YouTube on another tab. Another guy tried to impress her with a joke about moving all logging to Firebase. I hope your uptime SLA enjoys that, she muttered. By 1 o'clock, she was back at her old desk for the last time. Most of her personal items were already packed, but she sat down anyway, just for the ritual. She logged in with her still active credentials, because no one in IT had bothered to revoke access early, and opened up the master commit log of Orion Ops. 10 years of development, over 14,000 commits. Her fingerprints were everywhere. The rollback routines, the fail-safes, the weird little Easter egg in the dashboard that made the admin console display a cat gif on April Fools. She selected the final branch, Orion Ops Prod v9.4.2, and ran a clean export. Stripped of company branding. License headers replaced with her LLC's copyright. Nightingale Systems LLC, registered in Delaware, 5 years ago, waiting. She compressed the archive, encrypted it twice, and emailed it to a dead drop account with a subject line that simply read, Legacy Load. No one would see it but her. And eventually, maybe, the next company smart enough to pay her what she was worth. The moment stretched, silent, and thick, like the air right before a summer storm. She opened the internal badge admin console, entered her access code, and navigated to the screen that let her revoke credentials. Deactivate user ID, L. Morgan. She hovered for a second, then clicked, access deleted, there. Clean break, no alarms, no drama. Just a quiet severance of digital umbilical cord from the beast she'd kept alive with her bare hands and 4 too many bottles of Alev. As she walked out, she passed Max in the hallway. He was sipping on something green and smug. Heading out, he said, as if she were leaving early from a dinner party. She didn't stop walking. I'd wish you luck, she said without turning, but I think you'll need something stronger. She left her lanyard on the front desk like a badge from a fallen sheriff and pushed through the glass doors one last time. Outside, the sun was blinding. She didn't squint. She had work to do, and a deadline to keep. The thing about revenge is, it doesn't come out of nowhere. It builds like rust under chrome. Quiet, patient, relentless. Lena hadn't always been the woman who could kill a company with a keystroke. She started as the girl who stayed late to fix broken cron jobs while the office cleaning crew politely vacuumed around her sleeping bag. 10 years ago, Orion Ops was a stack of post-it notes and half a Git repo duct-taped together by desperation. Corvalux was a mid-tier logistics firm pretending to be a tech company. Their systems were paperclips and prayer. Lena made it run. Not just functional, resilient, like cockroach in nuclear winter resilient. There was the night in 2015 when the East Coast data center caught fire. Some contractor plugged a space heater into a daisy-chained surge protector. Everyone else panicked. Lena drove to the office in pajama pants and rerouted the CDN from the lobby using her own laptop. Her VPN credentials were more secure than their production firewall. She didn't get a raise. She got a mug. It said, Corvalux crew, we deliver. The handle broke a week later, and still she stayed. The long nights bled into weekends, the weekends into years. She skipped weddings, skipped funerals, skipped meals. There were nights she woke up to Slack pings, heart racing, whispering error codes in her sleep. The Orion Ops she built wasn't just software, it was marrow. Her code had comments written like prayers, / please don't break during rollout and / Lena, fix this later, you're the only one who will remember how it works. And then came 2019, a minor layoff, 12% of staff. HR called it strategic resizing. Lena called it a warning. Asked the guy who built the first version of the scheduler engine. Gone without notice. 2 weeks later, the whole deployment pipeline collapsed because nobody else knew where the staging certs were stored. That night, after plugging the hole with a bash script and a half-empty Coke Zero, she added clause 9c. It sat inside the license metadata like a sleeping dragon. Not hidden, just ignored. A single line in a forest of legalese. If the original creator is involuntarily terminated, license auto-renewal shall be void. All instances to expire on the next heartbeat check post-separation. Legal rubber stamped it. Engineering leadership never read past the section headers. Marketing wouldn't have known a license key from a lunch code. And so it lived there. Buried. Waiting. Now, sitting on her couch with a blanket over her lap and an old episode of Frasier muted on the TV, Lena scrolled through LinkedIn. Max Brighton's smug little avatar beamed at her from the top of a post titled, Tomorrow's Here. Corvalux launches Automation 2.0. She tapped it. The blog glowed with buzzwords. Disruption. Streamlining. Efficiency. Goodbye to outdated legacy systems. Hello to innovation. It was a full-on digital funeral for her life's work. Posted a stock photo of a diverse engineering team smiling in front of a whiteboard filled with absolute nonsense, hex codes, random squiggles, what looked like a drawing of a cat. Her throat tightened. They didn't just erase her. They threw a parade over the grave. She clicked bookmark. Not because she cared what they said, but because one day soon, those same words were going to age like unrefrigerated shrimp at a summer barbecue. She opened her laptop, logged into the registry dashboard. Again, verified the scheduled rollback. Heartbeat check enabled. Ping interval 6 hours. There it was, ticking toward oblivion. The countdown to silence. Lena exhaled, not bitter, not broken, just sharper now. She'd been soft clay once, molded by loyalty and caffeine and foolish dreams of recognition. Now she was forged steel. And Corvalux was about to learn what happens when you try to automate a woman who wrote the manual on control. The first morning of her post-Corvalux journey didn't start with LinkedIn announcements or #onward and upward hashtags. Lena woke up at 6:00 a.m., not from an alarm but from sheer muscle memory. The apartment was still. No Slack notifications. No pager buzz. No 3 a.m. API meltdowns. Just the gentle hum of her custom-built desktop purring in the corner, like a wolf breathing in its sleep. She poured herself a mug of overpriced herbal tea, the kind she used to ignore during release weeks, and settled into the quiet. Not bored, primed. The difference between rage and revenge is timing. She opened her personal dashboard, one she built long ago on a dusty subdomain routed through multiple anonymized proxies. Looked like a meditation app if you didn't know what to look for. The UI was clean. One panel. One clock. Next license check. 12:01 a.m. T-18H03M. A bash script sat coiled inside Corvalux's forgotten corner of GitHub Enterprise. wrapped in a dependency chain they'd never bothered to untangle. She had committed it under a generic system maintenance label in a batch of 12 unrelated patches 2 years ago. It pinged the Orion Ops license verification endpoint every 6 hours. It wouldn't throw an error, wouldn't log a warning, it would simply expire. The verification check would return false and cascade through the stack like a silent embolism. By the time anyone noticed, it would be because nothing was working and no one would know why. She leaned back, propped her feet on the coffee table, and pulled up the Corvalux blog. Max Brighton's face, polished, tanned, and filtered to Silicon Valley oblivion, beamed at the top of their latest PR fluff. Gratitude for the past, excitement for the future. How we're evolving Orion Ops, she read it like a war general studying an opponent's propaganda. As we embrace automation, we're grateful for Lena Morgan's years of leadership and foundational work. Her grace and professionalism during the transition have been inspiring. We wish her only the best in her next chapter. Grace. Professionalism? She chuckled into her tea. They really thought she'd walked out with a thank you card and a yoga mat. No one had noticed her social accounts had gone silent. Twitter locked, LinkedIn dark, GitHub activity frozen like she'd gone off-grid, because Lena wasn't announcing. She was watching. Every comment on that blog post, every engineer bragging about microservices and AWS rollouts, every recruiter thinking she was on the market. She wasn't unemployed, she was armed. Her inbox was already filling up. A startup in Boston wanted a seasoned architect to rebuild our infrastructure. A logistics firm in Denver offered a sign-on bonus that looked like a phone number. She ignored them all. There was one more thing to do. She navigated to the final function in her script. The kill switch had one last failsafe, her confirmation token. She entered her private key, encrypted via her personal UBI key, and clicked authorize. Now it was set. At 12:01 a.m., the system would request license verification as it always had. This time it would receive a polite but final 401 unauthorized license void upon creator termination per clause 9C, and nothing would blink. No red alarms, no fireworks, just a silent unraveling of operational control across 32 production servers. The CTO would sleep that night thinking he'd won, probably dreaming of his next conference keynote, talking about replacing the old guard. Lena set her tea down, smiled, then opened a new window and started researching beachfront rentals in Portugal. She had time. The kind of time that only comes when you've planted the bomb, walked away, and left them with the ticking. At exactly 12:01 a.m., the first heartbeat ping went out like it always did, routine, invisible. Embedded so deep in the Orion Ops framework it might as well have been a blood vessel. It reached out to the license verification endpoint, same as it had every 6 hours for the last 4 years. But this time, it didn't get the expected handshake. It got the kiss of death. 401 unauthorized. Clause 9C triggered. License expired. The system didn't crash, it bled. One by one, microservices began to fail license checks. Node clusters stopped communicating. Auto-scaling stalled. The cache backend, once humming like a Vegas server room, froze mid-packet and corrupted 3 transaction queues before timing out. By 12:14, the Orion Ops dashboard showed its first symptom. Blank metrics tiles, not errors, just nothing, like the brainwaves of a corpse. The night shift ops tech flagged it as a visual glitch and rebooted his terminal. Nothing changed. He messaged the Slack channel. No one answered. At 12:42, West Coast warehouse systems began dropping orders from the queue. At 1:16, a checksum failure halted the East Coast inventory sync. At 2:02, the load balancer routing to their logistics partner's API hit a dead-end point, retried for 30 minutes, then shut itself down out of protocol exhaustion. No alerts were triggered, because Lena had designed Orion Ops to be quietly competent, and now it was quietly dead. At 3:23, CTO Max Brighton, the disruptor, the podcast prince, was finally dragged out of bed by a frantic text from the head of DevOps. Orion is down, like down. Max didn't bother putting on real clothes. He logged in from his iPad in silk pajamas, swearing under his breath, already preparing a LinkedIn post about unforeseen migration turbulence. He opened the admin console. The page stalled, reloaded, then flashed red. License expired. Renew via primary contract authority. Underneath, owner, Nightingale Systems LLC. His face went the color of printer paper dipped in regret. He tried rebooting, purging caches, firing off bypass flags. Each one answered with the same message, unauthorized. License bound to original creator, revoked upon termination. By 4:00 a.m., a national logistics partner called the CEO directly on his personal line. Orders weren't routing. The tracking API had collapsed. Warehouses were printing blank shipping labels. The CEO, groggy and furious, demanded to know why the infrastructure was behaving like a haunted vending machine. Max, still frantically flipping through legal docs, said the words no executive ever wants to hear on a 4:00 a.m. call. I think we triggered a license kill switch. The CEO didn't respond, not right away. Then slowly, he whispered, she what? Meanwhile, back at Corvalux HQ, the junior devs Lena had knowledge transferred to were trying to locate basic service logs. Not one of them knew how to access the admin-level shell interface. One guy actually Googled Orion Ops reset password like this was a WordPress blog and not an enterprise-grade cloud stack. The system was failing in slow motion. Not with a bang, but with 1,000 paper cuts. Missed shipments, timed-out requests, error messages in formats no one could parse because Lena had customized the logging framework years ago and never documented it. Somewhere, a manager asked if they could just restore a backup. Max Brighton, looking like a man who just learned his parachute was packed with sand, said flatly, "Backup still checked the license." By 6 a.m., 15 Slack channels had turned into all-caps firefights. Legal was trying to reach Lena. IT was trying to find a way to roll back to a version that didn't even exist anymore. Finance was calculating how many penalties they'd owe vendors per hour of downtime. And Lena was walking. Just past sunrise, she strolled along the edge of City Park. Hoodie up, earbuds in, thermos of tea in one hand, calm as a woman on a staycation. Her breath puffed in the cool air like little clouds of satisfaction. A robin landed on a bench beside her. She smiled. The sun was up, the system was down, and justice was on autopilot. The emergency board meeting began at 6:37 a.m. Eastern Time, 30 minutes earlier than scheduled, because panic waits for no Outlook invite. The Zoom chime echoed like a warning bell as executives bled into the digital room, unshaven and undercaffeinated, each with that 1,000-yard stare of someone who just watched $1 million supply chain light itself on fire. Max Brighton was already on the call, his camera off, audio glitching, voice pitched somewhere between damage control and spiritual collapse. I believe what we're experiencing is a licensing issue tied to our core infrastructure, he mumbled, eyes darting between tabs like a drunk trying to defuse a bomb in a foreign language. Possibly triggered by a termination clause in the Orion Ops framework. The CEO's square was silent. The CFO was blinking so hard his glasses fogged. Licensing? The COO barked. I thought we owned Orion Ops, we paid to build it. Max opened a PDF. Yes, well, no, we commissioned it, but the underlying operating license, read the clause, legal, snapped. Her video was on, face pale, eyes bloodshot. She'd been up since the first outage alert and was now clutching the original contract with a grip that could bend steel. Max cleared his throat. Scrolled. Clause 9C. In the event that the original creator is involuntarily separated from Corvalux systems without cause, license auto-renewal is void. License shall expire on the first failed verification heartbeat post-separation. Ownership reverts to creator under LLC protections effective date of original submission. Silence, cold, breathless silence. The kind you only hear right before a plane nosedives. The CFO leaned forward, squinting. Wait, what LLC? Legal pulled up the submission record. Nightingale Systems LLC. Registered 5 years ago in Delaware, listed in the copyright header of the Orion Ops core repo. But that's her, the CEO said, voice brittle. That's Lena's company. Max looked like he was trying to unswallow a mouthful of glass. We never migrated the source repo. We forked the deployment scripts, but Jesus, we left the licensing headers intact. The board chair raised both hands like he was trying to stop a mental train wreck. Are you telling us the software we're running our entire infrastructure on belongs to someone we just fired? Yes, Max said, then immediately tried to backpedal. But we're negotiating, we're reaching out. Legal cut in, we already tried. Her counsel sent a one-line response, terms enforced as written. Panic bloomed like a virus across the screen. One director turned off his camera. Another started typing furiously, probably emailing a private crisis PR team. The CFO rubbed his temples and hissed, "We've got shipments rotting in Chicago and a $20 million vendor penalty clause kicking in at noon. She owns the operating license? How is that possible? Because none of us read past the footnotes," Legal snapped. She buried it like a nuclear failsafe, and we handed her the launch codes. The CEO finally unmuted, his voice thin as dental floss. "Get her on the line." Max glanced away from the screen, face pale and slick. "I don't think she's taking our calls, then offer her something." The CEO's voice cracked. "I don't care what it costs, just fix it." Legal nodded slowly. "She'll fix it, but not for our price." And somewhere across the city, Lena stood barefoot on her balcony, sipping fresh coffee. The air smelled like blooming jasmine and imminent reckoning. Her phone buzzed once. Known caller, then again, this time a text from an unknown number. "Lena, please, let's talk. We're ready to make a deal." She smiled softly. Let them sweat. She wasn't done yet. Lena didn't dress up for the call. No makeup, no blazer. Just a faded gray hoodie, chipped nail polish, and a coffee mug that said "Not my circus, not my monkeys in Comic Sans." She took the Zoom from her kitchen, sunbeams slicing across the counter like a spotlight cast by karma itself. "Good morning," she said, as if she were answering a brunch invite instead of sitting across from a dozen corporate officials in various stages of breakdown. Max Brighton's camera was off. Again. Coward. Legal was already mid-sentence, trying to sound calm, confident, not cornered. "We just need clarification on the license structure." "If there's been a misinterpretation, there hasn't," Lena cut in, voice even as glass. You terminated me without cause. That activated the auto-cancel clause. The system did exactly what it was designed to do. It's enforceable. I have the timestamps, the repo history, the email logs. Legal tried to smile. Sure, but Corvalux invested substantially in the infrastructure. We can argue implied ownership, or I filed copyright on Orion Ops Core 5 months ago, Lena said, lifting a single sheet of paper into frame like a winning poker hand. U.S. Copyright registration. Full code base, annotated, time-stamped, digitally notarized. You want the record number? Dead silence. Even the board members stopped blinking. She could hear someone exhale like they'd been punched. Max unmuted. Lena, let's be reasonable. She turned her gaze toward the camera like a sniper locking in. You told me software replaced me. Now the software's gone quiet and here you are asking the ghost for help. The CFO cleared his throat. What do you want? She didn't smile. She didn't blink. She named her price. You can license Orion Ops back. Double the original rate. Prepaid. Annual, not perpetual. With an SLA that includes me as consulting architect for the next 2 years. I retain creative control over future changes. Oh, and you issue a public retraction of your automation rollout statement. I want every blog post rewritten to reflect that Orion Ops was built and maintained by Nightingale Systems LLC. My name stays on it. One board member chuckled bitterly, a sound like gravel being crushed. God help us, he muttered. She played chess while we were eating paste. Another executive rubbed his face. You're extorting us. No, Lena said, tone dry as desert air. I'm offering you a clean way out. The alternative is continuing to let your supply chain drown while I drink tea on a balcony. Legal opened her mouth, closed it, looked down. The CEO, camera on but soul fully detached, finally spoke. Send over the agreement. We'll have our lawyers review. You can read it, Lena said, standing slowly, but don't edit it. The terms aren't suggestions. They're the cost of underestimating the person who built the ground you're currently sinking through. She clicked leave meeting before they could reply. Not in triumph, not even in glee, just with the peace of someone who finally stopped waiting for recognition and wrote her own damn value into the contract. At exactly 11:59 p.m., Lena opened her laptop from the terrace of a beachfront cafe where the waves didn't care about uptime and the air smelled like salt, citrus, and closure. She clicked open the contract PDF, final version. No red lines, no corporate gobbledygook, just her terms, word for word. Clause by clause, like tiny revenge poems written in Helvetica, she scrolled to the end. Paused, then signed, Lena Morgan Principal, Nightingale Systems LLC. The moment she hit send, the license reactivated. Somewhere 1,200 miles away, 32 Corvalux servers blinked back to life like Lazarus rising on a hardwired gospel. Logging systems reinitialized. Queues unfroze. Monitoring dashboards began spitting data like shaken soda cans. Orders resumed routing. API calls stopped timing out. Distribution centers flickered awake with the dumb joy of systems that don't know who saved them. In Slack, the night shift posted a single line, "We're green across the board." Max Brighton wasn't there to see it. He'd submitted his resignation that afternoon, quietly, without ceremony. No farewell party, no public thank you, just a forwarded Gmail thread and a disappearing act. HR was still wishing him the best in his future endeavors. Meanwhile, the new CTO onboarding packet sat unopened in its inbox, waiting for someone brave or stupid enough to inherit the system Lena now ruled from the outside. Because buried at the bottom of the contract, just beneath the fees, the SLA, the non-negotiable annual renewals, is one final clause. Consulting architect Nightingale Systems retains design authority and override access for Orion Ops systems for 24 months. Compensation, 3x previous full-time salary. She didn't just get rehired. She got promoted with sovereignty. Now, as the sun melted into the ocean and the cafe's overhead lights flickered on, Lena scrolled through her feed. Corvalux had posted a formal retraction, an apology, actually. It credited her by name, claimed the outage had been a misunderstanding of legacy licensing parameters, called her a visionary architect. She snorted into her drink. Visionary now, huh? Her phone buzzed. New email. Subject, infrastructure consultation from CTO at Actionstar TO saw what you did at Corvalux. Let's talk. Full architecture rebuild. Name your rate. Lena leaned back, salt air curling into her sleeves. She took another sip of wine, tapped out a single reply. Depends who writes the license. And hit send. Honestly, the most dangerous employee isn't the loud one. It's the one who listens, documents, and waits. This story hit me hard because it reminds us that real leverage isn't noise, it's knowledge. There's something beautiful about someone turning betrayal into power without ever raising their voice. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.